It happens to every animator. There's one keyframe and the other keyframe. But where do you put the in-between? Wrong! My name is Florian, and this is Amazing Animation Analysis. In-betweening can be tricky business. Even long-time animation pros still have problems with in-betweening. That's why Japanese studios love them so much. So today I want to talk about a technique that will help you and improve your animations drastically. And that technique is called thirds. To explain, I'll be using two circles, like so. Circle A is the first position and circle B the second. A is on frame 1 and B is on frame 2. Right now the circle just goes from A to B. We don't know if the circle is slowing down, speeding up, or in what way it moves. It just sort of teleports. Now we're going to add some frames in between the poses. Say we want the circle to start at A and slow down to B, and we don't want to use too many frames. If it needs to slow down, we need the next circle to be closer to B. That way, the distance the circle travels shrinks. Now that's easy when it's just a circle. But what about when it's a detailed figure going from point A to B? You wouldn't know exactly where to put the lines, and further frames would just get messier and messier. Because of this, what most people do is they put a frame smack dab in the middle of A and B. Then they put a frame in the middle of the new frame and frame B, and keep going until they're satisfied with the amount the circle has slowed down. I call this using halves, because you keep halving the distance between the frames, which makes in-betweening detailed figures a lot easier, because you just draw the lines right in the middle. Now for simplicity's sake, let's keep our example at 4 frames. When we play the animation, we see the circle slowing down. The distance the circle travels keeps getting shorter. But there's a problem using halves. There is indeed a slowdown when the circle goes from position A to the first in-between onto the second. But what's that? There's no slowdown between the first in-between, the second, and frame B. The distance is the same. And no matter how many times you put a frame in the middle, the last 3 frames will never experience a slowdown. The circle never actually slows down in the end. So what should we do? We could put a circle really close to frame B. That way there's a slowdown. But this method can get sloppy. And remember, this example is just with circles. So here's a solution. We put the circle in 2/3 of the way between frame A and B. And just look at it. The circle slows down. It slows down with just 1 frame in between A and B. Now I'll admit, putting a line in between 2 other lines is easier than dividing them in thirds. But with practice, this can be done. And it becomes a lot less complicated. You can even give the circle a constant speed by putting it on 1/3 and 2/3 of the way. Now the distance is the same. Now I'm not saying just only use thirds. I'm not just some kind of evil third advocate. You should add it to your arsenal and combine it with putting frames in the middle. Here's an example. Let's say we want the circle to start slowly moving from A, pick up the speed and ease in on B. On detailed figures, I'd first make positions A and B. After that, I put an in-between in the middle of A and B. Then I create an in-between 1/3 of the way between A and the first in-between. Then 2/3 between the first in-between and B. There's a speed up and a slow down. Halves and thirds, together at last. If you add this in your arsenal and keep practicing, one day you could become an anime in-betweener. And you'll also be saying things like, "One time, I lived on just coffee milk for a week, came down with a fever. And in my time as an in-betweener, there was a period of about 2 years where I lived on flour, mixed with water, and fried in a pan." Seriously, Japan, pay your animators. That's it for this episode. Amazing Animation Analysis is sponsored by these lovely patrons. Thanks for watching and see you on Friday.